Hello and welcome to the Topher Project. My name is Topher Field and I help busy people like you to stay up to date as the world changes around us. And something that is changing right now is that funding is being withdrawn, and it seems as though a little thing called Kovac is going to be ended with all of their samples destroyed. This is a story that I'll put my hand up and admit I wasn't really across, but a few people kept me informed, and I've brought on Julian Gillespie to help me to understand, get my head around this story. Julian, welcome.
Hello, Topher. Good to be here. Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there who would be like me, not really, I'd heard of it before, but I wasn't really across it. Can you just give us a briefing? What is Kovac? Why was it so significant? And why do so many people seem concerned about it being terminated?
Yeah, very good. Look, the long title is Queensland COVID-19 Vaccine Safety and Efficacy Statewide Study. Now, compressed together, the acronym comes out at QoVax, or the Kovac study. That's the shorthand everyone's been using. Now, Kovac was designed and created in 2021 by Professor Janet Davies. I think she was over at UQ. Doesn't matter, it's UQ or QUT. Anyway, it was an extraordinary idea. Queensland had not been impacted by COVID at that point. This was pre the full rollout of the COVID vaccines, as they're called, in this country. And she said, well, look, we need to understand the impacts of COVID, the illness, and also since these products haven't gone for the typical, up to 8 or 9 years safety profiling before they're released, we need some really live data on the ground to see how these vaccines are interacting with Queenslanders. It's specifically and only a Queensland study. That led to the recruitment of over 10,000 Queenslanders starting sometime in 2021. That covered 85% of the postcodes in Queensland. So we get an extraordinary reach of demographics in all sorts of circumstances and lifestyles, which is really critical for a thorough study. And they immediately, upon enrolment, started taking biospecimens or samples from those participants. And so what did they accumulate? They took saliva, they took blood draws of people, and serums, as it's called, but it's essentially a component of blood as well. And that went into an extraordinary biobank. That biobank has been looked after. It's a big freezer, essentially, for biospecimens. That's over at the Queensland Institute of Medical Research, QIMR. It's a world-famous organisation. So they're just looking after the biospecimens. Now, the body that's legally responsible, is an agency within Queensland Health that goes by the name of Metro North. That's a shortened version of Metro Northern Health Services or some such, but everyone calls it Metro North. An announcement, so $20 million was put up by the Queensland Government for this study to, just proceed and go for at least a minimum of 5 years, years until further funding could be secured. Then it was late 2022, the Queensland Government turned around and did a rug pull.
I'm sorry to interrupt my interview with Julian Gillespie. I will get back to it very, very soon, but I need your help. I would love for you to head to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Let me move that in a little bit. There we go. And grab a copy of my best-selling book, Good People Break Bad Laws. This is all about civil disobedience in the modern age, a topic that we need to be talking about now because, unfortunately, the way the world is going, civil disobedience is going to become more important and not less as time goes on. Then there is Good Christians Break Bad Laws. This is my theological breakdown of why I believe that Christians and people who believe in God should be among the first to actually step up and disobey governments when they go bad. If you want to know why I'm so passionate about this topic, you need to watch Battleground Melbourne. This is the story of the world's most livable city, Melbourne, Australia, as it became the world's most locked down city. And people like myself and so many other amazing people stood up against the government and did what was right, even when our government had gone horribly, horribly wrong. Plus, you'll find a bunch of different designs of merch, including Good People Break Bad Laws in black or in white, but there's actually a bunch of other designs as well, some funny, all of them thought-provoking, in T-shirts or in hoodies, in black or in white. And ladies, there is also a Good People Break Bad Laws design in hot pink, if that's your thing. And finally, there's also my master class. This is 6 sessions, a total of about 12 hours of me breaking down really important mindset-related topics for you to help you as you navigate the world going forward. And these topics include focus. Where do you put your focus and your energy and your time? Things like hope. Hope is a powerful thing, but it's also a dangerous thing. You need to understand it and the effect that it has on you, and where it comes from and how to use it to your advantage. Courage. What is courage? Why do some people have it and some people don't? Why do some people have it in some areas and not others, or at some times and not others? And how do you make sure that you've got it and that you surround yourself with people that you can have confidence in, that when the time comes, they will have the courage? How can you do that? Then there's also the issue of faith that I talk about. I dedicate a week to that. And that's not just Christian faith. That's actually faith in yourself and faith in your fellow man. There's a lot of cynicism that creeps in when you're in the space that we're in, and at a time like what we have right now. So I deal with that in a session on faith, and then a session on community. And this is how we can come together to become greater than the sum of our parts and be able to really tackle the world and face the challenges that lie ahead. And then there's a final 6th week where I get really practical, talking about immediate next steps and what I believe each of us ought to be doing in our own lives and in our own circumstances to ensure that we are actually as prepared as we need to be for the challenges that lie ahead. And that is also available for immediate access as a downloadable, or not a downloadable, but as an online webinar for you to access right there on my website, goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. So I hope you're enjoying this interview. We're going to get right back to this interview with Julian. Oh, actually, one more thing. I don't often mention this, but if you go to topherfield.net, that is my website that is in desperate need of a redevelopment, you'll find there a button where you can buy me a coffee. So if you'd like to simply make a direct donation, maybe you've already bought my merch, you've already got my books, and you'd like to support me and help me to keep doing stories like this, then please head to topherfield.net. Go to the Buy Me a Coffee button, and that's where you can make a direct donation as well. Thank you so much for your support. As always, stay free, and let's get back to my interview with Julian.
And said, oh, we're withdrawing the funding that we promised you. And this is after they've enrolled over 10,000 people and given those 10,000 participants undertakings and representations of what they would do in return for those people literally giving some of their flesh to the Queensland Government. So it was quite an exchange in terms of law. A bargain was hatched. If you give us some of your flesh, we promise to process that and produce an ongoing array of data into the future, so we can truly inform science and also yourselves as the community of whether or not these vaccines are a good thing, and also how we can deal with COVID moving forward. So, as I mentioned, in 2022. The Queensland Government did a rug pull, and I have not been able to find a really legitimate excuse provided by Queensland, the Queensland Government, for that. And put it in perspective, the Queensland Government spends over $4 billion a year on health services. So $20 million is a drop in the ocean when you've got $4,000 million to spend. And in the further context, Queensland was a recipient of over, a significant amount of the in excess of $10 billion that the Commonwealth Government threw at the states and territories for the rollout of these vaccines. So moving forward, we've got a situation. Look, I heard about the defunding of the program in 2023. It was brought to my attention by the renowned academic and medical researcher, Professor Wendy Hoy. We were just caught up in our then present separate COVID litigation, and we couldn't focus on this matter. Then investigative journalist Rebecca Barnett broke a story. I think it was last month. One of the study participants had shared with her a letter that Metro North had sent to all the 10,000 participants, informing them that all the, let's say, the computer data that had been compiled to date was going to be placed into archives, in other words, shelved, and the biospecimens, of which there's over 105,000 biospecimens held on the biobank, were going to be destroyed, which is like, well, hold on. What's the use of destroying them? Because you might pull the $20 million in funding, but it's relatively inexpensive to preserve that quantity of biospecimens into the future in case something comes up and you need to go and look at the early samples. So that got me quite alarmed. It got some of my fellow lawyers who we've been working on, some of these other litigation proceedings, quite concerned as well. And we said, well, hold on, is that legitimate? And more importantly, some of your viewers will know that we've been involved in a series of rounds of litigation in this country, and our most recent has been the GMO proceedings against Pfizer and Moderna. And part of those proceedings raised directly in the federal court, and it's been shared with the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions, that both the Pfizer and Moderna products that were rolled out to this country, mandated, coerced, and forced upon millions of Australians, over 22 million of Australians, they've been found to be excessively contaminated with synthetic DNA, which was used in the production of those products, but it wasn't extracted before the final product, hit the shelves for consumer use. Now, I'm sorry to be the messenger of bad news, but that synthetic DNA is known and has been known for decades to be an enormous and deadly trigger for cancers of all sorts and varieties. And so we've got a situation where we've got this incredibly valuable 105 biospecimens sitting there, which in our view is already a quantity of material that we envisage will be used in legal proceedings moving forward, because that excessive DNA contamination is going to directly impact the Queenslanders who receive those products. And so it's evidence of the contamination being there. Let's just put it there. We can't go into the details of the prospective legal proceedings that we're raising. And so we shot a letter off to Metro North over the last, it's been a series of letters now, informing Metro North that, hold on, no, we're alerting you to prospective legal proceedings that will be brought by multiple plaintiffs in the future to do with the DNA contamination issue, amongst others. And so we're invoking, there's just a rule at law, Topher, that if you inform another party that they're holding onto material that's going to be probative and used as evidence in future legal proceedings, that party's not allowed to destroy that material no matter what it is. And in these circumstances, it's biosamples. And indeed, the criminal code in Queensland recognises that, Section 129, once a party's informed that they're holding onto material that will be used in legal proceedings, if they proceed to destroy those materials, they're subject to 7 years imprisonment and financial penalties. And so we've got that stalemate going on right now between myself, the law firm PJ O'Brien and Associates. Some of you may be familiar with the lawyer Katie Ashby-Copens, who's attached to that firm.
Yes, of course.
And also the principal PJ O'Brien himself. So we're in this letter war where we're seeking for Metro North to formally acknowledge our concerns and to back down. And concurrently, so that's our legal position, but that's we as a third party intervening into that study to say, hold on, you've got these plans, well, we're going to block those plans because we've got reasons.
Sure.
But all the participants in that study, the over 10,000, they have their own separate the obligations and rights which are owed to them for the bargain to enter into the actual study. And as I started off this chat to begin with, they agreed to give some of their flesh to these people. Well, in Australia, there are very, very clear rules for medical researchers who involve humans, and it all falls under what's called the National Statement on Ethical Conduct in Human Research. You can't get a trial of any nature or study involving humans off the ground in this country unless you observe that national statement. They're essentially the rules for scientists to observe, so they equitably and fairly and properly deal with those that they're requesting to participate in their studies. Well, in this instance, we've got Metro North who's just trouncing and walking over the rights of study participants and ignoring their legal obligations. And so there's a much, much broader scientific or ethical conduct issue here. And indeed, we're into the realm of scientific misconduct now. And look, this is all taken so seriously that every study of this nature, it has its own human research ethical committee. Now, every ethical committee, they're meant to be the umpire to make sure the researchers in the lab for a study are following that national statement. And they're meant to step in and say, oh, no, you're not following the statement. Well, we've got also the ethical committee here who is also not pulling Metro North into line and saying, whoa, take it easy. Don't destroy this stuff. More importantly, you've been alerted by an outside party that there's a very, very strong likelihood that a lot of these biosamples show evidence of synthetic DNA contamination, which is going to impact the Australian community, Topher. So this isn't just for the potential liability issues that may arise because that was a contamination that nobody asked for when they were apparently trying to give informed consent for these products when they received them. It's also so the science and medical community can get prepared for how to deal with the ramifications from this DNA. As I've mentioned to others and in discussions with the various scientists who have been advising us in this interaction with Metro North, even when it comes to cancer, as long as you can detect it early and provide people with early treatment, well, then the survivability rate is very, very good. If you don't detect it early and people progress and then they get diagnosed in late stages of cancer, their prospects of surviving are very low. And so what we've got to use, one aspect of using these samples is to work out the testing regime that needs to be afforded to Australians affected by this contamination to identify as early as possible any cancers being triggered within them as a consequence of this unique form of DNA contamination, so they can then receive early treatment and survive that situation. So these are some of the issues that we're dealing with behind the scenes at the moment.
Mm. Well, the more conspiratorial amongst my viewers would be sitting there thinking, well, all of these reasons that you've laid out would be, in fact, the very reason why someone might want to shut down and indeed destroy the samples without wanting to get conspiratorial. Would I be correct in saying that this is a sample set that can never be replicated, that we would never again be able to reassemble such a large sample
It would be impossible.
Before and afters?
That's correct. That's correct. I've spoken to some of the principal persons involved. 15% of the samples involved took samples from people, bloods and salivas. They had never had COVID, and they had never received a vaccine of any form, COVID vaccine. And so there's your control group. Many people would recall that Pfizer and Moderna had to go through clinical trials before they could get approvals anywhere for these products. Well, Pfizer had these proposed trials, which were meant to run for a minimum of 5 years, because these things had not been properly safety tested before.
Sure.
And only 2 months after the beginning of their trial, they did what's called unblinded the controls. So all those people, 22,000 people who did not receive their product for that clinical trial, they unblinded them and administered it to that control group. And so we've lost all that valuable, their clinical trial in many respects became useless. And so what we have globally, the most important data in terms of having an absolutely pure control group and right at the beginning of the administration, it's like rerunning the Pfizer and Moderna clinical trials all over again. We've got that valuable data source. So you're right. Look, I'm not going to use the word conspiratorial. I'll say it straight out and publicly. There are many vested interests in the Queensland Government and Commonwealth Government who know how valuable these biosamples are. And we've got this very odd and, there's quite a degree of irony here. Some of the parties who will be liable for compensation, suits for contamination, will be the Commonwealth, will be the Queensland Government. So we've got a situation here where the Queensland Government funded a research project which is producing evidence which is going to be used against it in terms of legal liability. And so we find it as no strange coincidence that somebody cottoned onto that fact in 2022, because the adverse events and the deaths arising from these products, you well know, started going through the roof in 2021.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, and by 2022, the peer-reviewed literature had reached what we're up to about 3,500 papers, peer-reviewed literature and case studies attesting to really how lethal these products are. And so somebody just said, in Queensland Government said, we've just funded the creation of an evidence data bank, biospecimen data bank, which is going to be used against us. We need to pull the rug on this. And so I'm not being conspiratorial. I'm just being the cynical lawyer, rational lawyer, and saying, they're just trying to destroy evidence. So we're trying to preserve it.
Well, speaking as an Australian, and I know I speak on behalf of many, thank you to you and to everyone else involved, to journalists like Rebecca Barnett and so many other people that are very much keeping this flame alive, and in your case and the other lawyers that you're working with, keeping the hope alive that we can see some accountability at some point in the future. I'm going to leave it there. That's all we've got time for, but thank you so much, Julian, and I look forward to staying up to date with this story as it progresses.
Thank you, Topher.